Hi, it's Paul from Old Man With. Today I'm an old man with the second part of a two-part raised planting bed project. This one was slightly more complex than the previous. This time it was on a block paved area rather than earth, and the slope was greater. The look we wanted to achieve this time was a stepped rather than a level finish. If we'd gone for level, the top would have looked odd. The bottom end of it would have stood about 3 foot off the ground, which would look strange. So although there was no digging out to do, to get the look of the bed coming from the ground, so to speak, it meant I needed to cut sleepers along the full length to get a taper to suit the slope. This one was also more complex in terms of the angles, and additionally where the top stepped down, we didn't want just cut square ends, we wanted compound angles. So the materials and tools used were by and large the same as the first raised bed. One exception was probably I didn't use the borer mitrix to get the cut angles. This time I used a Silverline digital angle finder. I got this a few years back from Toolstation, and I hadn't actually noticed that it has a mitre cutting function on it. You can set the angle of the cut you want and press a button and it will give you the correct mitre angle. So first thing to do was establish the fall of the ground over the length of the bed. You can make this really complicated, but the easiest thing to do is actually lay a sleeper in the position you want it and block up one end until it's level. I did exactly that and cut some support blocks to put under the lowest end to suit the measurement. Then you build along and across from there with the intention of filling in the space underneath afterwards. I will say I'd drawn this out in advance on a CAD system, not because I needed to, but because I have one for work. It's just as easy to use pencil and paper. In fact, it can be a lot more rewarding. The only advantage of CAD is that it's easy to modify the drawing or change it back, which we did a lot to try and get the look that we wanted. The main need for a drawing is to try and figure out exactly what you're building and what materials you're going to need. Going back to the construction, the same as the first one, I had the lowest sections in place first and then I built up from there. In many ways it was a quicker and easier build than the first because there was no digging out involved. When it came to infilling the bottom sections, I did this almost at the end, and to be honest I cheated. To get the taper on the sleepers, I would have had to have cut through the 200mm width of the beams, and my circular saw only has a cut depth of 80mm, so I couldn't even cut from both sides because I would have had an uncut section of 40mm in the middle. Yes, I could have cut that by hand, but I didn't want to. I considered chainsawing it. I have a chainsaw that's not for the faint-hearted. It's probably straying a long way from basic DIY, and also getting a straight cut can be a challenge. So instead I cut a sleeper into 3 lengths through the 100mm height, end to end, and then set up my table saw to cut the tapers. So I ended up with 3 100 by 60mm approximately sleeper sections. So the infills you see are actually only about 60mm thick, but you can't tell. Finally I did the very top finishing section with the compound angles. I did this on the Metabo sliding mitre saw, and again I run out of cut depth, so I had to turn the sleepers over and cut from both sides. If you do this, and it's easy enough to do, it's quite possible, but the thing you do have to watch is that effectively you have to turn the sleeper end over end, not just over as it were, to get the right cut angle. Or you have to reset your mitre saw every time, which I didn't want to do once I'd got the angle set. Don't rush it, because if you do, you'll end up with a double bevel on the end of your sleeper, and I couldn't possibly tell you how I know that. So there it is. If you have any questions on it, please leave a comment below, and feel free to like, subscribe, etc. for other videos. Thanks.